are back once again, and I'm Ken Lundeen, your host for the B2B Sales Summit. And today I am fired up. I have Chris Daltorio on the line. Chris, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, Ken, I'm fired up to be here as well. Good for you having this summit. The B2B Summit's going to help a lot of different sales professionals out there, beat their number. So thanks for having us on. Looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, this is awesome. Let me give them a little bit of background because I think you're kind of that stealth guy in the industry that people really need to get to know, right? And I'm fired up that you're here. So for everybody listening, let me give you the 60 seconds on Chris. So Chris was a 7-time salesperson of the year, cut his teeth in sales, middle management, coming up, paying for 5 kids to get through college, working just like you and I do, trying to earn that commission dollar. So he was at Slazenger when he did that, left and was recruited by another big sporting goods company. And then guess what? They said, man, we need this guy back in the house. So they recruited him back. He came back in as president and CEO of Slazenger to run the company. But don't lose sight. This guy's been up and down the spectrum, and I am just thrilled to death with what we're going to get out of you today. Sufficiently embarrassed, Chris?
Yeah. Thank you very much. You're too kind. You can tell it's still Christmas time. Thanks, Ken.
The good news is, Chris, with all those accolades, you haven't made me call you Mr. Chris, so I appreciate that. So, well, here we go. We're going to talk about something today that I'm fired up about, and let me kind of give a quick little blurb here. People who are watching this interview will notice that it's a little bit different. Chris has a fantastic thing in his studio called a lightning board. And so this video will look a little bit different because we'll actually be able to show you some visuals as we go through this conversation. So Chris, I appreciate you bringing us into the studio to use this.
Ken, you got it. It's going to be fun to work with a lot of your viewers today. Hopefully they'll we call them BCOs, behavior changing opportunities. And if they walk away with 1 or 2 that they can start to monetize right away, that's a win from our perspective.
Yeah, let's go change the world today. So let's talk about this. So here's a concept, I guess, that I think gets really goofed up in sales, right? Because we're so focused on making our own quota. We're so focused on getting to the end of the month, the quarter, the year, and those things lead to bad discounting and a bunch of other silly stuff. So we're going to talk today about insight selling and how we can control customer conversations within that process. So the first question I would ask, I guess, is what is that? It sounds like a lot of words, but talk to me about how you view insight selling and controlling the conversation.
Yeah, a good question. Insight selling, and for our reps out there and our managers, they can kind of ask themselves, when I'm talking to a client, and let's say call it, it's usually a prospect. It could be a client, but a lot of people, the number one goal coming to 2018 and beyond is I need new clients. I need new logos. So we're out there and we're doing all those business development tactics to get these conversations, which is great, really important. I think you've had some great hosts on the B2B Summit here that are kind of focused on that, which is spectacular. I hope everybody takes advantage of those. And in addition to that, now you have those conversations. What are you going to do to sound different? And I think we forget this, how similar we all sound. And we tend to focus on, I'm different, because again, maybe you've done this a long time, but let's say you've been in sales 3 to 5 years. Maybe you haven't screwed this up for 30 or more years like I have. And you kind of learn from these different things, right? So if we sound similar, how can we sound different? Instead of talking about we've been in business since 1972, or the leaders this or whatever it might be. And do they even care? So insight selling is really about teaching them something, educating them on something they didn't already know. And here's the thing. It's about their industry. It's not about you. And we're not going down this road, but when we do talk about cold calling or that first conversation you have with somebody, often it's the tip of the iceberg that leads them to want to have a conversation with you anyhow. And the tip of that iceberg is that insight selling, reframing the way they've been thinking before and educate them on something new, elevate the importance of what that is and why it's important to their title and their role, and then ignite some action.
Okay, well, that's a great illustration of what it looks like. So tell me this. Maybe we can start here. Maybe we can start with, what are the biggest mistakes you see people make when you're talking about selling?
So when we're having that client conversation, it's really normal, and everybody could kind of think to themselves, how comfortable are you? And I remind myself of this all the time. I'm 49 years old, and I think a certain way now. When I was, 39, probably a little bit different. When I was 29, and go back 20 years ago, it was a lot different. And I was comfortable in a lot of selling environments, but still it was different. And I walked in there and I felt as if my job was just to tell these great things about our company. And I learned that the best salespeople in the world, they get there. There's a point when you do get to talk about your product, your solution. I mean, they want to know, but you've got to first find out their why. Why do they even care? And the key is what's really happened. And I'm going to jump over. We talked about the light board. Thanks when you introduced us. I'm going to jump over to what this is and illustrate this. We had era one selling. So if we go back, and this is back in like the Xerox sales training days, this is we learned about solution selling for the first time, and everything we were told to hear was ask more questions, get the client talking. This is really important, right? But we weren't doing this enough. Era one focused on I better have a great product to sell that people really need because it's all about the product. Think about the iPhone. That would have worked even back then. It was just so good. Everybody wanted it. You can talk about it and you're going to be pretty good. So if the product was good, era one selling worked. But a lot of bad things, a lot of bad habits were born in era one. Era two selling came along and some pretty cool things happened. They said, hey, let's do this more often. Let's ask more questions, get them talking. Most of us have heard that the client should be doing about 80% of the talking. We should be about 20. But none of us really practice that. And by the way, it's probably really more like 70-30. And the other little caveat.
2 ears, one mouth, right?
Yep, use them proportionally. Good call, Ken. We want to make sure we're aware of that. But if we test these conversations, usually we fail. So it's okay in era two to ask more questions. That's something that a lot of top salespeople do. But today, this is kind of like the change. We get into era three selling, and things have changed. Now, your buyer, depending on what study you look at, is somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 already through the buying process. This thing called the internet, people have already found out a lot about what you do. So when we come in, your questions now, you're still going to ask a lot of questions, but after you get what you need to know, you're going to start adding value to that client in an entirely new way. And that's going to be insight selling. This is where you take control of the conversation, but always you want that the prospect or the client to feel as if they're in control. So if you're talking, it's okay because you're talking about what's important to them. You're showing you already know. If you're still asking here in era two, hey, listen, what keeps you up at night? You're not going to probably say it that way. You might. That's era two selling. Your competition's going to beat you. So I see that a lot with SDRs. So you're new, you're setting appointments. My daughter's been in sales for a while now, and she was in pharmaceutical sales. She went into medical supply sales, and then now she's actually selling technology. But when she was doing this, she would call me sometimes. Her territory was up in DC, and we're down here in the Research Triangle Park area of North Carolina. And we'd have some fun conversations. She would say, hey, listen, how do I influence the decision of this 54-year-old world-renowned cardiologist? She's 24, he's 54. Right. They're not paying attention to me. And we kind of role played what we were talking about. And she was saying, well, hey, doc, my product does this, my product does this, my product does this. And I said, what do they not know? That he's a cardiologist. Sure, they're really busy doing their thing, but hey, what new information can you give him that makes him stop and think? So we had to reframe that the way she was thinking to go in there. And the other piece of this is your confidence. If you have industry knowledge, you're going to have the confidence to go ahead and have that peer-to-peer conversation. So it's not limited to SDRs, but I see it a lot with SDRs where you're up here, I'm down here, the tonality, the way we speak, everything. Like, hey, I just wanted to have this first discovery call and kind of see how things going. Is there anything I could help you with? Well, here's the thing. That we're sometimes taught that because that's better than maybe other alternatives. But think about it. They're so busy. Have you earned the right to even ask that question? So you want to give a little bit before you ask for something in return. And that's what controlling the conversation is all about. You're not talking about you yet. You're talking about them that allow it to happen. One more point on that, Ken. I want to jump to a little slide I have it somewhere in here on our light board. This is kind of what we talk about being the consultant, if you will, before you're the salesperson. These different hats that you can wear. And, generically, 65% of the client conversation over here, if, Ken's listening in the background or any other sales expert, your manager, she should be thinking, hey, this sounds great. I don't even know is this a salesperson or is this a consultant here that's helping with the business? After you go ahead and get a little bit of interest, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, this is where you can go ahead, come over here, and then rescue them with your solution. That's the second part of the conversation. You asked where they mess it up. We get this backwards. We get on the phone and we talk about this first, and we haven't earned the right to do it. We need to show them that we're somebody that we can add value. So I think that's probably the biggest mistake that I'm seeing out there, and something that I hope all of the managers, they'll take audits to the conversation. My sales folks out there, are you listening to yourself? Maybe recording some of your calls if that's okay to do, and get some feedback. I think it'll be something to be a high yield activity, to say the least.
Yeah, that's helpful, because I think one of the things when I talk to people and I see them happening out there, I think they need to get in line with one concept, and that concept is that to have a really great product or service is the minimum level of entry. It is not the
Mhm.
sales pitch itself.
You got it. And that you bring up another point when you talk about that. Your product and service, it's important. Let's face it, it is. I mean, we would all rather, sell a product that people want than one that they don't. But this brings up something that we call the commodity cube. And what's happening out there, we're talking to some prospects, maybe there's an RFP, there's some different things, and they're coming out there and they're kind of saying, hey, listen, we need A, we need B, we need C, right? So we need A, B, and C. And then they're asking us, can you do these things?
Yeah.
And we're saying, oh, that's fantastic. You need A, B, and C. My solution, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what you sell, but our solution, we do those things. We've got A, B, and C, just like you asked. And we're so excited about this. And then we get feature creep. We start talking about these things. We have to step back. I'd be surprised, especially a lot of millennials out there, and I say that in a good way. Sometimes people hear millennial, they think that's a negative term. My folks at the office here, they call me a millennial wannabe. Gosh, to be, and right now, your folks that are watching this, you think about it. These are people that invested their time to say, wow, hey, listen, the B2B summit, you've got whatever it is, 16, 20, phenomenal speakers brought together, and I can look at this. What a phenomenal use of their time, as opposed to, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to do that thing any differently. So good for all those listeners. They're already investing in themselves. And I think that's a characteristic of the top salespeople that have ever worked for me or that I've trained, is in between their ears, that's their own LLC. So if your name's, Jill Smith, you own Jill Smith LLC, and the company you're working for, they, may own your job, but you own your career. And if you're not investing in yourself, gosh, what a mistake. So I think that's what's great about these type of events that you're putting on. So back to this commodity cube, you're saying, hey, listen, my product, it does the things that you asked for. Well, what happens is you're going to get into this. It becomes all about money. You just got into that commodity cube. So there was a neat story that was out, good book. It's called Frugalnomics. Very few people have heard about it. It's written by a really neat guy, Tom Pacelio. And Tom was introduced to me by a mutual friend and client at IBM, Greg Price. And we had dinner in the spring. And I got to tell you what, I really enjoyed talking to Tom and some other folks from his company. They get it. And his book on Frugalnomics, it talks about the ROI, what we're always thinking. And later on, I'll probably get into the 3 buy buttons that we always have to hit before people are going to make decisions. But one is to step back. And in that book, he made a comment that of all the features and benefits, so if you went to your marketing department, you said, why would you buy our widgets, our service, whatever it is? I don't doubt you could come up with 100 different reasons. Well, here's the thing. Your clients on average, according to Tom Pacelio, they value about 13% of them. I've seen other stats that are 14, 15%, doesn't matter. But the point is, our clients look at us as a sea of similarity. They don't see the differences that we do. And then we make this mistake. We start talking about our differences before he or she cares about them, or they understand why they should care about them. So what happens is we sit there and say, oh, you need these 3 things, we can do them. Now we just got in the commodity cube, right? Hey, you're all the same. How cheap, how cheap, how cheap. Instead, what we need to do, instead of talking about our capabilities, going on about these other things, let's get them to care about those first. So we'll come up here. What should you care about that you haven't brought up yet? And this will vary depending on the title. So if you're a chief financial officer, I need to know your needs are different than if you run human resources. And I need to know what you should value and have some statistics and stories to back that up. Because now all of a sudden, when I get you to start caring about things up here, you're going, geez, I thought I had this all figured out. I was just going to get the cheapest person that can do these 3 things. But now you have me doubting this. Now you get them. Because now they go, well, you're right. Now I want all that. Oh, how cool is that? Because we do it. And that's the idea. That's the whole concept of solution selling and insight selling, spin selling, the challenger sale, all great concepts that say, make sure you're leading to what we call your UVPs, your unique value proposition. So find out of these 100 things you do, which ones are truly unique here, and then try to get your clients to value them first, and then we'll lead to this. So now instead of being this commodity cube, we come out here and boom, this is where we're uniquely qualified to win. That's what you call controlling the client conversation. We're just leading them to think about what they should have thought about already, but maybe they haven't. I hope that makes sense, Ken.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And your 13%, the client only cares about that 13 falls in line with the idea that if you're selling complex enterprise software or something else, we tend to only use 15 to 20% of its capabilities anyway. And so
Yep.
it makes sense that if I'm not the guy sitting in the chair thinking about all the things that are different, I'm really trying to live core beliefs. And if you haven't found a way to tie into those things that matter in my world, yeah, I don't care about your differentiators.
So true. And one last point on that thing, we call this the value grid. And there's really four compelling reasons why we buy, right? It's, you get into the neuroscience of this and the different things. I attended a conference, actually the first time you and I talked when I was up in Toronto. And Dr. Greg Wells and Dr. James Rouse were there. And I'd listened to them the year before in Zurich, and they're brilliant people. And they get into the neurology of, it's not about selling, it's about persuading and communicating. So to get us from where we are to change, we've got to make sure that our story, how do we mitigate risk? People want to avoid pain, fear, and discomfort at a very alarming rate, much faster than something that's pleasurable. So make sure your story talks about mitigating risk. Next, what do we want to do? Show me ways that we're going to make money. Now, let's get back to the key with this value grid is in the middle here. We have to decide, who is this? I'll use the same titles for consistency. Am I, the head of HR, or am I a CFO? Because I'll customize this depending on who they are. And this is complicated. This is challenging. A lot of salespeople that are listening to this for the first time, these are some things you can begin to implement right away. But go read the Challenger Sale. Go read Insight Selling. Go read Spin Selling. Talk about these different things that are out there. Find out what works with you and see what you can do about it. And again, as a courtesy to your viewers, our goal, I don't know if this is because I have 5 kids or whatever it is, I love to help young people. If anybody says, well, I'd love to take one of these courses, it's free, right? I mean, any of your listeners want to do it, we'll talk about how they can get this at no charge. What we do that's a little bit different, and I'm not here to talk about me, this is just truly to give this away, but we take all this content, break it up into 8-minute modules. We invested in some virtual sales training that's spectacular. People can go through it. There's meetings and self-directed exercises. They can get certified on all that. Again, if anybody wants it, it's free. So I don't want anybody to think I'm here to pitch our stuff. We really want to help your audience beat their number. But some other things. What are we going to do to save money? What are we going to do to escalate efficiencies? You don't need to hit all of these, but you need to find out and make sure you're crafting your message to make this happen. And I'll tell you a neat story that I think will resonate with your audience. We were working with a company in the healthcare space, and we were practicing this, and they said, hey, we've got something good. And the other course that we worked on was cold calling. And we have a process there where, we can kind of reach the decision maker. And they said, we've been trying, it's kind of a joke in the office, for 6 or 7 years now. We've been trying to reach the CFO at this one large opportunity. This was up in Valparaiso, Indiana, a small town. And they said, we can never get him. It never works. So we practiced our system to get him on the phone, and the sales rep got a phone call back. And they had the conversation, and it led to, again, another Tom Pacelio stat that I'm a big fan of, is 65% of your pipeline right now is going to end the same way. And unfortunately, it ain't good. It's going to end in no decision. So you don't get the business. Maybe you get a little bit of a soft win in the fact that your competition's not going to get the business either. They just didn't change at all.
Well, let's be clear for a second. There's no such thing as a soft win.
You know what? You're right. It's kind of like, I'm not going to cut both wrists. I'm going to cut one. That's probably a bad example. But, it's kind of, I'm right with you, right? It's kind of like, well, whatever. But you didn't win. You're in sales. You're either going to get 100% of the dollars or nothing in most cases. We've got to find a way to have a compelling way to change this. And again, sales professionals, don't go safe and steady. If you ever get a call from a cable company or the satellite companies, they, I don't mean to pick on any industry, but they do such a poor job of training their people. They're like, you know what? Just go read this script. So we get these cold calls and whatever else. Hello, my name is so-and-so. I'm Director T. We're the leading provider, blah, blah. It's like, this is bad, but if we just let people in the wild, wild west, it'll be even worse. Yeah. So it's like, really, you're going to make me listen to that? So I talked to this one client. I said, it's the same thing. Your CFO, in this case, it was a man. So I said, what's going to make him want to take this meeting? Because even if he did, he thinks he's already happy 65% of the time. So they got the call back. They had the conversation, already happy. So this went on. They tried him another time in the year, already happy. So fast forward, and we talked about it. So when I went up and I was doing some live training with them, and they said, what conversation could we have that could be any different? And I said, maybe none. Tell me what you've been doing. And they hadn't had this course yet that we're kind of touching on today, but they're like, hey, I'd really like an appointment. If you gave us a shot, I think you'd be impressed. We've been in business since 1972. We're family owned and focused on companies like you. None of that was adding any value. They sounded like, they had quota breath, trying to hit their quota, not like you were trying to add value. So we did a little bit of research. We do a lot of business in technology and healthcare and different sectors. And the stat was phenomenal. And, my team came up with this stuff and I was really proud of them. And here's what it was. So imagine this, and then we're going to talk about what you can do to make this in your world. When we had those conversations, instead of saying those kind of, we've been in business since this, or we're great, we walk on water, we had a couple different things. The first one we did was said, hey, listen, it may not even make sense to meet. But the reason I wanted to reach out to you in the first place as a CFO, and again, for whatever reason, we've never talked before. Kind of interesting what's happening right now, where the Department of Labor just hired 300 new auditors. And I know on the surface you're saying, well, who cares? Well, here's what's happening within the healthcare employee benefits and everything. Your chances of an audit just went from 3% to 33%. And, nobody wants the hassle of an audit, but here's the thing 70% of audits are failing. And the failure of that audit is $100,000 in hard costs, plus a lot more at the different soft costs, reputation, and inconveniences. So we hadn't talked before. I wanted to reach out and kind of throw that out this way. If you'd like to invite us in, we can take a look at this and see if you're compliant. And there's a 30% chance that you will be. At that point, go give your current provider a big corporate bear hug because he or she's doing a great job. But there's a 7 out of 10 chance that you're not. And at that point, you might have another company look at this. You might have us look at this, but somebody that can bring you the value. All three outcomes benefit you. One of them benefits both of us. Hey, does it make sense for you to invite us in? And it was great because they invited us in, and this happened back in the summer. About 2 months ago, they landed this account. And you said something earlier, and I hope your listeners and how many was it, Ken? Was it about 16 different speakers that you have?
No. It's over 30 now.
Phenomenal. So I didn't even realize, good for you that it grew that much. I mean, you're bringing so much value. So you've got over 30. I hope people that are listening to this are going to go buy $30 on a nice leather-bound notebook. Get the nicest notebook you've ever had. And they're going to go through these 30. Don't rush it, because if they listen to them too quickly, it's just white noise, right? Go take a look at this and goal yourself. If it's one a week, if it's 2 a month, whatever works for their world. They have other high yield activities, but go through, take phenomenal notes from everything that you have from these experts that are out there, and then over a period of time start implementing these. My managers, my leaders that are listening to these things, it's the same thing. Take a look at this, but how much better could your people do if they took 1 or 2 ideas from your now 30 experts on the panel that you put together? My goodness, the value that you can bring. But that's what a leader does. Whether you're leading a team or you're leading your own focus and your own goals, it's something you need to do. But step back and take a look at the value that we added with this insight selling. And the idea is we just taught that client something they didn't already know. So my managers, if you are listening to calls from your reps or my reps, if you ever record yourself or just kind of think about your script, if you will, is it teaching them anything? Is it doing anything to mitigate risk? Well, I can take your chances of being audited and make that not matter as much. Increase revenue, maybe not so much. Lower cost, absolutely. 100,000 is the average one. Increase efficiencies, yeah, because now you don't have to worry about an audit. You can focus on some different things. So that I have to talk about what they care about over here. If your people can focus on that value grid and bringing insight, I think you're going to see that two-way business conversation happen, instead of feeling like you have to sell something. And you know what? Even salespeople don't like to make it sound like they're pushing something on somebody. They want to talk to somebody that can really value what they sell.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you can sell over time. I mean, most of the experts you'll talk to, me, you, etc., will all tell you one thing, and that is the sale is a natural byproduct of a whole bunch of great conversations.
Yep.
Right.
Good
And
point.
so we end up in that position. And I like, you kind of your unique proposition, because I like to say, what's unexpected value proposition? Because
Good.
I think a
Good.
lot of times our buyers believe they know everything they need to know.
Yep.
And I think the idea of inside selling, the idea of getting them to where they need to go is very, very important. So so I'm kind of looking through my notes here, and I guess we've talked some about this and we've dived into it, but can you get a little further? And how can I help shift my customer's mindset? You've talked about how do I get the appointment, right? But if I go deeper through the cycle, how do I continue this process of adding value?
It's just going to be a case of being client centric. I wanted to pop this up too. So good timing
Yep.
with that question. This is an example of something we call a confidence card. And the idea, you step back and say, did I educate? Did I elevate the importance of this? And did I ignite action? And you're going to do this with market intelligence. This card shows an example. You might have some of that. You're still going to be asking questions to tee this up. I hope people really understand you need to have some great high yield questions, and no way, shape, or form by saying questions are not important. But if you think about it, and I can't remember who came up with the term, but death by questioning or solution fatigue. I mentioned that I see it a lot with folks that are, hey, I just got you on the phone. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to do a discovery call. I wanted to see what's keeping you up at night. You haven't earned the right, be a little bit of a go giver. So questions are important, but so are the stories that you're going to tell them of why they should invest some time with you. So if they have these things ready, here this was in the legal industry, one of the industries we sell into. It shows the persona as a managing partner at a law firm in this case. But if you're a CFO and HR, you need to create these confidence cards so you can quickly kind of figure out what you're going to handle, how you're going to handle certain situations. If they give you a, hey, thanks for the call, but we're pretty happy with the current vendor, do you have a couple challenge statements to professionally challenge that client to reframe the way they're thinking? No, here's the deal. I'll have somebody say, well, what if I don't really know anything about my industry? Well, you got a problem, right? You've got to work with your marketing team, your sales leaders. Go find out who the best sales rep is and take her out to lunch and say, hey, let me pick your brain. Have your manager work with you. Manager should be leading these kind of things. If you don't do it, you're never going to be able to hit all three buy buttons. Because sometimes, and I'll agree with this, sometimes we outthink it. Sometimes people buy off they like, trust, and respect. But in a competitive scenario, that's not enough. So logically, and this is out there. I think Tom Pacelio, gosh, I feel like I'm plugging Tom. Tom's book, Frugonomics, he has a quote in there to talk about logic where 95% of clients need a positive ROI to be the outcome of a business conversation. And I don't remember the number exactly, but more than half of those prospects or clients are expecting the sales rep to make that ROI plain and visible. Don't expect them to be able to see it. So that's important also. It's a good litmus test of your conversation. Can I see the logic ROI? But we get into that left brain, right brain. And again, my Simon Sinek fans out there, he does a nice job, buy his book. But even if you just Google Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle, there's a 19-minute YouTube video out there that's kind of like a summary of his franchise. But you get into, why we make decisions in the limbic brain and the neocortex and some things that, if you're a sales rep, you might think you don't care about, but it ties into the other part about it. So just because logically it makes sense, that part of your brain, sometimes we call it our gut, it just didn't feel right in our gut. And what's really happening is it doesn't feel, even your conversations, you can just see it's not going well, but we just kind of like, well, okay, thank you, goodbye, instead of saying, hey, Ken, let me call a timeout. I kind of called you because I help a lot of CFOs like yourself. I feel like I might have caught you at a bad time and I'm messing this up a little bit. Is it okay if I kind of tell you what I was really calling and just tell me if it's not a fit? Why don't we do that? Why don't we humanize it? And it's that defense mechanism that we have in our brain, a little, fight or flight kind of thing. But emotionally, that's the part of your brain where decisions are made. So I know logically, I should drink water at lunch, but emotionally, I'm craving that sugar high and I want to drink a Coke, whatever it might be. But people make decisions here. They make decisions emotionally, and then we find ways to logically say that we did it. So, hey, why did you buy that from that company? Oh, I love the sales rep. She was awesome. We're not going to say that, although emotionally that might have played part of it. And then we need contrast. And especially this time of the year, we're about to hit January. Ken, I'll throw you to the test here. What's the number one New Year's resolution that everybody in America has? What do you think the top New Year's resolution is for
Well, I can
2018
tell you
here?
that I went back to the gym yesterday. So
Dude, hey, this was not me plugging that you need to lose a few. You look great, but I'm saying the plan here is, we set these New Year's resolutions to get more fit, right? And that's wonderful. And what are we bombarded with this time of the year? They start really right around now between Christmas and New Year's. These companies, a huge percentage of their ad budget is on TV for what I don't even remember, Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers,
yeah.
yeah, the P90X type of things that are out there, Beachbody, and what they have are contrast. And if you think about it, it's the before and after photos.
Yep.
So visually, it's like, hey, I used to look like this, now I look like this. That's in your mind when you see that dopamine. There's a drug release that says, I want me some of that. That looks pretty good. That one of your buy buttons. So it's the same thing for my managers out there. Take a look at our pitches, our presentations. Do they make sense logically? Are we winning the human skills here? Does it make sense emotionally? And then that third buy button is we're going to try to give them some contrast. That's something else that's really important.
Good. Would it be reasonable to say the following, though? I know that you explained it from top down. Would it be reasonable to say that actually we work it from the bottom up? That we have to provide contrast, connect emotionally, and then they'll justify logically.
Yeah, I think you do. You're right. Because if not, you're not going to where we make decisions emotionally. I would say there's some truth to that. And I was just popping back over here, but there's one more thing I want to show you on whiteboard here, as we call it, because you brought up a good point. Let me flip up here to the front. This one slide is we have something, our conversation flow. And again, we're not going to cover this in any detail now, but when you're talking to them, this is when you're that consultant. Your goal is to bring up a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in their mind. Because remember, 65% of the time, no change at all. It's because we didn't have enough for them to step back and kind of go, maybe I should be doing something different. So our conversation flow, if we look, we call it the four model. What fear have I brought up? What have I said? You should be thinking about this, but you haven't yet considered it. Then when I get them a little bit like, geez, you might be right about this, that's where I'm going to say, hey, don't worry. There's an opportunity to fix this. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And same thing, you're still staying true to that first 65% of being a consultant. You're not trying to tell them how great you are yet. So then you're like, oh, okay, this can get better. And then you rescue with your solution, because by now they value your unique value proposition. So that's where you come up and do this. And then you can elevate it next with one of my favorite topics, which are stories with strategic intents. And that's what you were talking about earlier, Ken, is that contrast and that emotion. There's nothing that does that better than stories and examples. And I see it all the time. My SDRs are a little bit nervous sometimes because they're talking to a decision maker that, her title might be this, and I feel like I'm Joe Schmo, 2 years out of college. Do I really have a story to tell? Even if you don't, even if it's your first day of selling, your company does, your peers do. And all you need to do is change the me to we, and you can tell some really compelling stories. And if you're not good at it, track us down at mynewvelocity.com. Our story selling course, get certified in the whole thing. Again, free, not trying to sell anything. As part of the program you put together, Ken, we'd be happy to pass that on to your learners.
Awesome. Well, I can certainly see how this can help control the conversation and do those sort of things. So as we kind of wrap up here and we come to kind of the end here, talk to me a little bit. If you were going to give me advice as a B2B salesperson, and I'm going to go out in the market tomorrow, what are the top 3 things I should be focused on in order to be more successful this year than I was last
year? Yeah, good point. I would say this. What am I going to do to beat status quo? Because that's number one. That's what's happening. That's our biggest enemy right now, is no change at all. So identify who the real enemy is and its status quo. Then what insight do I need to do to reframe the conversation? Because it sounds great, right? I can reframe it. Of course, my kids are getting older. They challenge you more all the time. But when my kids were little, I can reframe why you shouldn't have a lollipop before dinner, right? It just doesn't work that way. But I have to have that insight. If I don't have that insight, I'm afraid to try these things. And, fear comes across in your voice, especially the folks that are, whether you're just setting appointments over the phone or more times we're selling over the phone, your voice is your secret weapon. So you've got to make sure that you're conscious of your voice. Practice recording yourself. We all have smartphones right there. There's free apps on them. I see people spend 4 hours practicing a PowerPoint deck, but they don't spend 4 minutes practicing some talk tracks. Scripts are wonderful for practice, But when we're talking, it can never sound scripted. So I love them for practice, but make sure you own your conversation and then just go be yourself. That's the other thing. Again, you have over 30 experts. Take what you like about it. I like to say take it cafeteria style. We covered a lot today ourselves just in this small topic. There might be some things people love. There might be some things they don't like. Just like when you go through a buffet, take what you like, leave what you don't. If anybody ever listens to a speaker and just because you disagreed with one idea, you threw the other ones aside, I think you're not really investing in yourself. So have a plan for self improvement. And you teed me up again for this one. One of the things I like to do, this is my one secret. Once you know what status quo is, my folks here in the office, we all have these things, these little silver bullets. And if there is one shortcut to success, one silver bullet to life, it's having goals. And one last book I'll recommend out to you, The Strangest Secret. The Strangest Secret was written by Earl Nightingale, 1957. I write content from, on social media selling or different things that 18 months later, it's outdated. This is 1957. Same thing. My folks that listen to audible.com, you can download it for $2, whatever it might be. It's 37, 39 minutes long. I bet I've listened to it. I was going to say 100 times. I try not to exaggerate. I've listened to it over 50 times, and I get something new each time. That be goal oriented. Write down your goals, break them up by quarter, and go after those things, whether it's how many quality conversations you want to have with folks, whether it's new insight you want, working with your managers, welcoming the feedback that you can get to get a little bit better, but have goals around all your high yield activities. I think 2018 will be spectacular.
Yeah, perfect. And you're a good company too, because I like to quote Tony Robbins on that front. And he takes the next step beyond the goal setting is to take massive determined action. Because it's the only way
Good.
you're going to absolutely change your behavior. So
Yep.
Clearly you've crushed it today and given a lot of people a way to go out and absolutely change the status of their life and beat quota next year. But tell me, you've mentioned it a couple of times, but I want to make sure that I wrap in this. Tell me how that they can find more about you and your company online or otherwise.
Fantastic. And this is, I'm really speaking to your audience now as individual users that I don't want your money. I want to help you sell more. If that works, you're not going to keep this a secret. You're going to tell your company about it. So that's the game with this, right? But if anybody wants anything, mynewvelocity.com is our website. Go track us down on the website. Let us know what you need. And we've got hundreds of different online chapters they can take. We've got some studio sessions that will do different topics like this. They can call in on, something we're real passionate about is referrals. Make sure that they know exactly how to ask referrals in a way that they're going to, we can get into whatever topics they want, but don't be strangers. We want to make sure anybody that's part of your program, we're going to go ahead and support them as individuals any way they need. And my managers, if you're looking to implement some of these things, but maybe don't have the courage or, this is a little bit new to you, we've got a course on managerial courage for my managers. I'll give you that one as well. So they can track us down, anytime in 2018, and we're going to take great care of them.
That's awesome. And what a selfless offer to help out with, B2B sales. The reason we put the summit I put the summit together, I guess, is I feel there's a gap between the training, knowledge, and education that sellers and managers are getting today and what they need to do in this, ever changing world of sales. You and I came up and it was, give me a reverse directory. Let me pound out a few things. And I had all of the information and they didn't have any. Today certainly got more difficult. So Chris Daltorio, New Velocity. We can certainly see why you were able to put 5 kids through college, living on commissions. And it's obvious that you have a phenomenal command of the sales process and how to help people out. So I'm honored that you took the time to spend with me on the B2B Sales Summit. And I look forward to seeing you very soon, my friend.
My pleasure, Ken. Happy New Year.